Here now is Chief Meteorologist Tom Sorrells with Talk to Tom. Sponsored by Greenway Dodge.
Florida wildlife goes all out to keep warm when the temperatures drop. Many are familiar with the manatees in the springs, but did you know other creatures create their own antifreeze? Say what? That's true. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tom Sorrells here at the powerful WKMG News 6. We'll get to all of that coming up in the next half hour here on Talk to Tom. But first, I want to answer your questions about the weather and any other questions, anything you want to ask. This is your time. Feel free to ask. Just go to clickorlando.com and get in on the conversation. Today's first question comes to us from our friend Lily Sanchez. Lily wants to know, hey, who chooses the names for the hurricanes? Well, Lily, we've answered this a time or two here on Talk to Tom, so I don't mind answering again. It's a good answer. You would think that I get to do that, but I think you know me well enough to know if I was getting to name the names, they'd be cooler. They would. But the hurricane names are chosen for us by the World Meteorological Organization, which is part of the United Nations. And they pick them way in advance. They have a meeting where they pick the names, and we know what they're going to be because they rotate every 6 years. Like in 6 years from now, we'll use the same list that we used this year, minus the ones that get retired. We retire names if they create a lot of human loss. That is, if they kill a lot of souls, take a lot of souls away, or if they create big-time economic havoc. If they're truly crushing in the economy, or they're truly dangerous and have killed people, or if they're meteorologically a standout, like if it was the longest running Category 5 storm circling in the middle of the ocean but never caused any trouble, we would still maybe retire that name. So 6 years from now, we wouldn't use that name. If it killed a lot of people, caused a lot of economic damage, or is meteorologically a standout, it would get retired. Otherwise, we'll use that name again. So if you go back to the record books and you're looking for Hurricane Charlie, Charlie came around, and then in 2004, we had a bad Hurricane Charlie. We'll never use that name again. It got retired. Same with Hurricane Matthew. Same with, all the ones you can name from the past, from Hazel on down. Retired, never to come back. All right, next question comes to us from our friend Caitlin. How do experts predict how many hurricanes will be in a season if the weather is always changing? That's a great question, Caitlin. I work on this one a lot. There are any number of people who forecast hurricane seasonal forecasts now. I'll come back to those in a moment. The real experts who started this whole thing were the folks at Colorado State University, Dr. Bill Gray and his understudy, Phil Klotzbach, were the original creators of the seasonal forecast. And back when Dr. Gray started this 30 years ago, it was kind of laughed at, frowned upon, not thought much of. But he had figured out some similarities, some of the way things are set up in the atmosphere to make things, or to kind of indicate what kind of season we would have. He deals with sea surface temperatures. He deals with whether or not we're having an El Nino or La Nina. He dealt with all kinds of other factors, from situational pressures on land in Africa to rainfall in the Sahel region of Africa. That one went away. They look at different factors, try to figure out analog years when the weather setup was the same way. So all that rainfall or lack of rainfall in the Sahel region of Africa, they took that away because they figured out whether it rained or not didn't seem to add up to any number of hurricanes. So they check that one off the list. But they look at the atmosphere, sea surface temperatures, salinity, pressure, gradients, atmospheric changes, whether there's an El Nino or La Nina, put it all together, try to figure out a year that looks like that, and base their forecast a lot off analog years and analog seasons. That's how it's done. So yes, the weather changes day to day, but forecasting hurricanes is almost climatology. Now there have been any number of yahoos online or at TV stations who will claim they're doing their own seasonal hurricane forecast. For the most part, those are trash. And when the season's over, they'll come back and go, oh, look, I'm so proud of the way things went. And right here in this zone, we nailed it. And what they're showing you is climatology from the course of the last 30, 40, 50, 100 years, where things do occur off the East Coast or do occur this time of year in the Gulf, and they go ahead and say, oh, there could be a hurricane there. We think it really could. And then when something comes close, they claim victory and go home. That's kind of trash forecasting, and they ought to be ashamed of themselves. You can go online and figure it out. But that's the people you really need to pay attention to if you're looking for a good seasonal forecast. As the folks at Colorado State, and Dr. Phil Klotzbach does a great job and is totally transparent in what he's using to do the forecast, and totally transparent was the original creator. They're the OG, as the cool kids like to say. All right, let's talk about the next question. Comes to us from our friend Luis. What is the most powerful part of a tornado, top, middle, or bottom? Okay. Wind speed determines the power of a tornado and damage that it does in the EF scale. And so what happens is you get a rotation aloft, and you get like big rotation aloft, and that's powerful on its own. But as you have a vortex that comes down to the ground, there's a swirling part that's swirling the fastest, does the most damage. A tornado has an eye wall like a hurricane does, but it's small in circumference. It's a little bitty thing compared to a giant 10 or 15 mile or 30 mile or 40 mile, even 60 mile eye of a hurricane. You get a small tornado eye. And so I would say the most damaging, powerful part of the tornado is the bottom, where it's tightened up, conserved its angular momentum, is spinning at a rapid rate. High aloft, it'll be spinning, around, but at the bottom, it's flying, and all the damage happens when it encounters the ground. And so I'd say that's the most powerful part. To me, to my reasoning, the bottom. Last question of the day before we jump into the animals comes to us from our friend Dave. Dave said, did you know there's a song out with Danny Trainer in the first line? No, I did not. And I know Danny pretty well. And I would be willing to bet Danny doesn't know there's a song out with his name in the first line. I would appreciate it, Dave, if you'd send me a download, or send me that Spotify link, or send me that YouTube link to that song, because I want to know. If there's a song out about my man Danny, I'm going to want to know. He's going to want to know. I would question, is it a rap song or country song? I know that Danny is more into blues. I promise you. But please, let me know what that song is about. Yes, Danny Trainer's name in the first line. Can't wait. All right. Thank you for all your questions. And remember, if you want to get in and get your question answered, it can be weather related or other. It can even be about Danny Trainer. I don't mind. Just feel free to send it to us at clickorlando.com/talk to Tom. Let us know if you'd like to be on the show, and maybe we can hook up with you on Zoom and get you in and ask your questions almost live. Now, stick around as we break down some of the unusual ways that Florida's wildlife stays warm during the winter. Don't go away. We'll be right back. If you thought Florida's wildlife was wild, you should see the wild ways some of them keep warm during the winter. We're talking everything from pythons to manatees, insects. Hello, everyone. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tom Sorrells from WKMG News 6. Meteorologist Samara Cokinos went down to the big rabbit hole of research, trying to figure out how everything in Central Florida stays warm. We're talking all kinds of stuff. We're talking insects, birds, pythons, manatee. Samara, welcome back to Talk to Tom.
Thanks for having me back on. I'm surprised after the last interview you said, hey, come back.
Hey, no worries. You crushed it. Are you kidding me? Weirdly enough, people want to know always what's going on with the animals. They want to know anything we know about pythons. We did a show recently where we talked about python DNA being in the waters of Central Florida, which in turn tells us that the pythons are here. We're just not seeing them because they're shy, and we won't see them until there's too many of them.
Too many.
But we do know, based on what I read in your article on Clicko, that the ones that are here, animals that are in Central Florida, are very interesting as well. And they have cool ways of staying alive, if you will, during the winter. Talk to me about alligators. What'd you find out?
Well, like you said, I went down this rabbit hole trying to find out a lot of this information. Like, you feel bad because we're always saying, hey, bring in your furry friends. Well, you can't bring in, the the alligators unless you work
Right.
for, but was it Gator World, Gatorland?
Unless you want to go to
You know,
jail, it's illegal.
unless you want to go to jail, but you can't bring every possible wildlife creature into your home. So I was like, well, how do they prepare for this kind of thing? And so alligators, if you ever see an alligator in the winter out in the middle of just open land in the sunshine, mouth wide open, that's exactly what it's doing. It's regulating its temperature. So they actually like to, because they're cold-blooded animals or cold-blooded reptiles, they like to bask in the sun to help regulate their internal temperature. So that's what they're doing. And I mean, it doesn't get any more Florida than that now, does it?
Yeah, you see them on the banks
You
of
do.
rivers, lakes, ponds, whatever. So
Lake
most of the
Apopka.
time, I think they're trying to cool down, but sometimes they're trying to stay warm.
Yes, in the winter times they're trying to stay warm and kind of help regulate that internal body temperature. And snakes will do that too. But
Okay, well, let's talk
snakes-
about snakes. We'll talk about
Yeah.
that. What type of snakes were you talking about in your article?
Just all of the snakes. So random different snakes. I mean, just depending on what they're all more afraid of you than anything. So they're not really trying to come at you or to attack you. But I did put a note in the article saying, hey, if you're going to be, collecting all the leaves that you just raked up, but they've been there for a few days, you might want to kind of check that pile of leaves because snakes will like to hide in those leaves because it also provides them warmth. So it's kind of like a blanket for them. So you may be surprised at what's hiding in those leaves. But they also like to hide under, big tree trunks or the limbs that have fallen that you haven't picked up or that have been there for a while.
Right.
But they like the sunshine too. They try to slow down their movement and basically that helps them conserve a lot of energy.
What a drag.
Yeah.
As we've
Well, they're a lot
documented
less
before.
active in the winter, which is good.
Yeah, but if they're out there under my brush, that's a problem for Big Daddy Tom.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about birds. Birds are, as we know, we've talked to experts here before, they're left over from dinosaur era. They are feathered, they are ancient, and they know somehow their bodies keep them warm. Explain.
Absolutely. So they actually shiver. Do you know that?
I've seen them shake, but is that truly a shiver?
Yeah, it's a shiver. So what they're doing is they're kind of like trying to keep warm because those muscle contractions actually allow for their body to maintain some type of heat or make a heat, kind of like when we shiver, same type of thing that they're doing. But they also have really cool ways that they've adapted, and some of those in different species, it depends on what type of bird does what in terms of their feathers and how fluffy they get. If you ever notice in wintertime, a lot of the birds will look a little extra pudgy and fluffy. It's because they are fluffing their feathers to allow for some of that heat.
Hey, don't body shame the bird.
No, I'm not
fluffy.
body shaming the bird. I promise. I love them extra fluffy. I think they're so cute.
Kind of waddling around. Now, when you say fluffy, you don't mean just body mass. You mean like feather size too, right?
Yeah, they're feathers. So they grow, some of them grow supplemental feathers, like down. We'll see down. We have some people have pillows full of it, or now we have down alternative, which is what I prefer. But that down helps to keep them warm. It's kind of a fluffy layer. But they also have some birds will have oil near their tails, like the end of their tail. And that oil, they will, when they're preening themselves, when they're cleaning themselves, they're always doing something to keep their feathers clean because that's how they trap the air next to their body and keep it warm. But they have these oils in their feathers that they can actually spread all over when they're cleaning themselves, and it actually weatherproofs their feathers.
Let's move on to insects for a moment. I don't like spiders and snakes, as Jim Stafford would say, but spiders do have a cool way of staying warm, because you'd think we cool down into the 30s, they should all be dead, but they don't die.
Right.
Why?
And they slow down. If you ever, I remember when I was little, somebody said if you put one in the freezer, it won't die, but it'll stop moving. And I'm like, okay, well, the reason why it won't die is because spiders make their own so-called antifreeze. I was like, what? When I read that. And so I looked into it a little deeper, and it turns out they have a chemical inside their bodies that prevents ice from forming within their bodies, so it keeps them from freezing to death. But
Scary.
spiders, starting in September and October, start to be a little more active. You'll see them out and making webs and stuff, and then all of a sudden you'll notice them in your home, and they're trying to come inside because it's getting colder and they need a place to be for shelter. And of course, if they lay their eggs, your home is their home.
There you go. All right, let's get back to mammals. Something I do love, like bobcats, fox, coyote, bears. How do they stay warm? I mean, we know that bears hibernate. Do fox also hibernate?
So they don't hibernate as long as the ones do up north. So they don't have to, right? Because our winter weather is not as dire as up north winters, or a bit bitter cold and where they sleep for months on end. But what a lot of these animals, you'll start to notice again, they're looking a little extra fluffy. And that's because they eat more to pack on the pounds. So when they're less active in the winter, they can conserve a lot of that energy, use some of that stored fat for energy, so they don't have to go out and about for extended periods of time looking for, their prey. But they also will grow thicker fur. Some of them will, like fox will. And they will also have dens, or if you have, a really raised porch and you're out in the middle of the woods, guess what? You might get a bear underneath that. Even though they're very shy animals, they have a tendency to go away from the public, except for the ones that we reported on going downtown near Lake Eola. I think he was a little lost, though.
Hey,
But that was the season for that. And now we're getting into winter, and they're not as active. When they go out, they try to minimize the amount of energy that they have to use. So they pack on the pounds leading up to winter, so that they have a little extra, a little fat jacket, so to speak.
okay.
To keep them warm.
I can identify with that. Let's talk about everybody's favorite endangered species, the manatee, and what happens with the manatee and why we could be causing trouble. Go.
Yeah. So when I went down there, I was like, oh, okay, well, everybody knows about the manatee, right? They always go to where the warmer water is, and that's our natural springs. The water, it may be cold in the summer, but in the winter, it's actually pretty warm as its natural source. But the problem is when we have power plants, and you really don't think about it, but the discharge station where the water runs in there is actually warm. So it's good and it's bad. It's an artificial source of warmth for manatees. And you're thinking, oh, well, that's good. We're helping them out. Not really, because then they don't actually learn where the real natural warmer sources of water are for them. And say if that power plant gets shut off for any reason at all, then that water is not going to be warm anymore. And unfortunately, manatees are creatures of habit, and they will still go to those discharge basins near the power plant, even if it's not operational, and they will sit there anticipating that water to be warmer, and they will die.
They'll do the Pav Log Dog thing. They keep going where they're trained to go, even if it's not working.
Yeah, and usually it's younger ones that do it because they don't know where the sources are. And of course, if it's getting cold fast, they're trying to find the warmest source of water as quickly as possible, to get out of that cold situation. They don't like cold weather at all. They can't survive in it. They can actually get sick and die from it. I mean, we've done plenty of reports on that, but the discharge station really kind of threw me off a little bit, because I was thinking, wow, here we are producing energy, and we think, nothing of it really, unless you get a really high bill, right? But other than that, we don't think about how it impacts nature. And that's one way that we're providing an alternative source, an artificial source for manatees, but it's not necessarily a good one for them.
All right. Samara Cokinos, thank you so much for the information. Tell people where they can find your article if they want to go read about it.
So you can go on clickorlando.com and underneath the weather tab, there will always be some sort of wild weather story. I try to find some of the weirdest things that weather impacts, and you'll see everything from pine cones being meteorologists to to stuff about, spider season, to even like underwater waterfalls and lakes that are like Jurassic levels. So it's crazy.
Thank you, Samara, for being here. That's Samara Cokinos. You can watch her
Thanks for
every
having
Saturday
me.
and Sunday night on the powerful KMG. Thank you, Beth. Appreciate being
Thank
here.
you.
All right. And remember, you can listen to our podcast anytime, anywhere. You listen to podcasts, and you can always watch us anytime on News 6 Plus.